As fantastic a CFP as Mel O is, and as wonderful an attorney as I am, please do note that anything said in our show are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finances, the Other F Word. Today we are still saying Zoe, but she will be coming back for our next episode. She is finally getting on the mends. But what is super fucking cool is we have Jax here. Now, I have wanted to get Jax on for a very long time with conflicting schedules and things like that. So let me tell you who the fuck you're about to hear from. Jax is a cybersecurity IT expert with 13 years of experience in the field and owns and runs her own cybersecurity firm, Outpost Gray. And she is also the recent author of Cybersecurity Career. And she has experience in special ops as a warrant officer conducting global operations in cyber and electronic warfare. Jax, thank you for fucking coming on.
Mel, I'm excited to be here. This is awesome. I know we've tried for a long time and now we finally made it happen on a Sunday morning. So you're up and rolling out of bed for me, and that's like it's 11:46, but I'm still drinking coffee and Kahlua for all the fans.
Yeah, and I'm drinking a caffeinated drink because I literally just woke up. And I want to start off the show by saying that I'm a little resentful of Jax for making me read so many big words this early in the morning. That is like the most tactical cybersecurity global. I'm like, wow, that's a lot to read in the morning. So we've talked a little. Wow, that was weird. What happened to my voice? That was a little weird. If I was drinking Kahlua, I'd be totally smooth. It'd be lubricated. My throat was lubricated.
Yeah, you sound like you're going through puberty just then.
Oh, yeah. At least I don't have zits. So we've talked on this show, and anybody who is at least relatively concerned about cybersecurity on any situation. We have talked on this show about things you don't do, phishing, financial fraud, that type of stuff. We've also went even as far as on the US power grid episode, we talked about the vulnerability of our power grid to ransomware attacks and to other cyber attacks. But that's really as far as I went into it. So educate me, like tell us what the fuck cybersecurity, what any of that means.
Oh my God, that is a big thing to unpack. So cybersecurity is a way of looking at securing your network, your infrastructure. And so before we really jump into it, I want to clarify there's a difference between cyber and IT. And the big difference is understanding cyber is a new thing. Prior to that, we had IT. IT hasn't gone away and become cyber. What has actually happened is we'll just call it a new branch of IT, which is cyber. And cybersecurity is a way of protecting our IT infrastructure. It's putting the security protocols in place, such as firewall or using VPN or multi-factor authentication. Those are all things that work on your IT network. But those are cybersecurity techniques and procedures to secure your infrastructure. That's first and foremost, so people can understand that difference. But cybersecurity, it's really started to grow and mature because of adversaries. Like, unfortunately, and when I'm speaking, I'm going to be speaking primarily related to Western culture, the United States and where we are, and sometimes globally, but really focused on the United States. But we're really reactionary, as you've seen. Like, our government doesn't do things until the pressure is put upon us, or we're attacked, like a cyber attack happens, colonial pipelines, solar winds. And all of those things happen because we had weak cybersecurity infrastructure. And so when we dive into cyber crime, those are going to be the areas that I'll be talking about. Is some of the reasons that we're being impacted is because of our weaknesses within our cybersecurity infrastructure.
We touched on the colonial pipeline ransom. And I believe, if I remember how that played out, he ended up paying them, but then I think he got it back. Is that correct?
I think he got most of it back from the FBI breaking into their Bitcoin, because cryptocurrency, some is anonymous, but you can still get into it. Anything is vulnerable. And there are some, Monero, I think, is one it's a highly it's unattributed and it's harder to break into. But the Bitcoin that they used, or the cryptocurrency was Bitcoin that they used, which the FBI got back. So they got a majority. But if you think about it, I think it was $5 million was the ransom amount. I mean, this is an oil company. That's like a drop in the bucket for an actual ransom. So that whole entire thing, it really, a lot of the individuals in my field think that the cyber criminals that conducted that attack, it was kind of like a oops. It wasn't a planned attack, and it was almost a pucker factor once they did it and they realized the catastrophic impact that they had. It was almost like an oh shit moment. Hey, here's your money back, or let's take our money and run. Because that, if I remember correctly, that's also what the threat actors did. They took the money and ran away from it, because the threat actors that did that, they are actually in business for conducting ransomware as a service. It's a business model. And so the threat actors that conducted that operation, somebody had gone to them and said, hey, like, target this facility, do this attack, do this thing. But I think when it happened, I think Russia was like, we did not plan that, because it wasn't nation states. It was a threat group, which is a different animal, which made us, the United States, not be able to actually take any actions against Russia, because it wasn't a nation state.
Mm. And with the Colonial Pipeline thing, I remember when we covered that, I thought, this is a fucking oil company that crippled, I believe I think it was the South, the Southeast, South, like Texas and kind of over, because that's where the pipeline delivered. But as far as like it being just kind of not a really trying to actually attack them, that almost makes it worse, because it's like, oh, your shit is so fucked up that somebody with the base knowledge could just get in and attack you. Let's go from there. So kind of, if you need to refer to something, go back to the Colonial Pipeline, because we did cover that on the show and people might be more familiar with it.
Yeah, the Colonial Pipeline happened because of a weak password. You guys probably already know that, but
wait, I'm sorry. The whole fucking hijacking was because of a 1 week password.
Yes, that's how it happened. Yeah.
What the fuck, dude? Look, y'all need to keep a journal and start upping your fucking password game. I should be changing my passwords as I'm on the fucking show right now.
I change mine every 6 months on my own. And that's why multi-factor is also critically important to have on any and all machines and systems that you have. And it was a weak password. And we were actually just talking about this in class last week. But the attack was actually isolated. A lot of people think that the threat group was able to actually get into the SCADA system, but they were not. They were isolated enough, but they thought they were in the SCADA system. And what's crazy is if they had actually gotten access to the SCADA system. So for everybody that may not know, the SCADA system is an old legacy system, and it's an acronym, and I cannot remember what it stands for, but it's the legacy system that operates big industrial facilities. And I call it legacy because it's been around for a long time, since industry systems have been basically around, and it is extremely hard to update and patch. And so there's a lot of vulnerabilities, and it's not because these organizations don't want to patch the systems. It is because, think of it as a single point, and then you have a ton of different systems. So like, for example, let's talk like your house. You've got your internet, Wi-Fi, but how many things do you have connected into that Wi-Fi? If you have a smart house, you probably have your thermostat and your Google Puck and your computer and maybe your phone, and all these other systems are plugged into it. Well, that's sort of like the SCADA system. So trying to update that one thing, and you've got all these other operating systems that are coming out of it, it could disrupt your entire infrastructure. And so you can't just come in and be like, we're going to just do an update to this system right here, this system, because these will not be able to talk and communicate because of coding. Another example would be like, when Apple does, I have an Apple computer, my Apple people will know this. Whenever Apple does an update, they just did their 15 iOS, it messes up a lot of what you have on your computer, because now they don't communicate because the coding's different and all of that. And so you think about it on a big scale. So why, now going back to Colonial Pipeline, the issue with industrial systems is you've got this old SCADA system, but if a threat actor can get access to it, they will have access, because it's that central point, they will have access to almost your entire system, being able to take it offline, operate it remotely. A myriad of things can happen. And it's really actually kind of scary. So when these threat actors got in there, they thought they had access to the SCADA system, but they didn't. But going back to what you said, Mel, they didn't have access to the SCADA system, but what they had access to was so tiny and small, but yet it had such a broad impact. It actually impacted more than you actually know. I live in Northern Virginia, right next to DC. We were out of gas. Maryland, Virginia, New York, everybody freaked the F out, and we were completely out of gas for almost a week and a half. It was absolutely insane, all the way even into Tennessee. And I'm just like, this is crazy. People lost their shit because of this. And that was just because a threat actor got in there and kind of like messed around with the system and shut off the pipeline for what, a few days? It was wild. Think about that at a catastrophic level though.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to tie that back real quick, because when we've talked about the Men Who Built America episode, I've touched on monopolies throughout this entire show, and it's no secret of how I feel about monopolies. But when I hear that, all I hear is that we have one primary oil company supplying oil to to a quarter of the United States. That is a monopoly in that area as far as transporting oil. And then we have them with a system like Jax is talking about, well, it's hard to update and things like that, that can completely take it offline. Now, if you take that to a global warfare, when we're talking about financial monopolies, it's not just about greedy bastard 1%ers, okay? But what you have to understand is that the vulnerability that opens us up to as a nation is very dangerous. We talked about Walt Disney being a monopoly, which on the surface looks all fine and safe because it's Mickey Mouse. Well, if you fucking take over Walt Disney, you have access to 40% of the media. And since their antitrust lawsuit got thrown out, apparently they're able to get bigger. So all of these things, when I'm talking about monopolies, they all circle around stuff like this that's right under the surface that you don't see.
Talking about like the monopolies, just when you were saying that, I was just thinking of Facebook and social media and the monopoly that has on it. And it's wild. I mean, I'm not big social media, you know that. And I know that people were like, oh my God, instant Facebook's down. And oh my God. And there was this huge deal. But that was a reality for me, because I'm like, Facebook not only owns Facebook and Alphabet, but then Instagram and Twitter. And there was another myriad of lists. There was like 5 other things that it owns. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a monopoly of social media. Think about how the strong arm that they have for the influence, the information influence they have on our society. You are being fed by whatever their algorithms want to feed you. It's freaking wild. Yeah.
And we covered that in the artificial intelligence episode. We also covered that in Facebook, the monopoly. So go back and listen to those shows, because I'm not playing with you guys. All this shit is fucking connected. And when we're talking about investments and money, everybody out here is wanting to tell you what ticker symbol to buy, but they don't even fucking see the big macro trends that are going on in the global economy. And this is the stuff that you need to be aware of. This is why I have such a problem with people on social media, which we'll get to later. So yeah, and I didn't even know Facebook and Instagram was down until Zoe told me. And I was like, okay, like who cares? So fucking, yeah, that's sad. Anyway.
But I look at it too. There were some people, I mean, that's their way of life and living, and they sell stuff. So I looked at it that way, but I also know they're like just those Instagram models that probably freaked out because they couldn't get their selfie up for 8 hours or however long it was down.
Their butt cheeks didn't get looked at for like 8 hours. Oh,
I know.
Maybe some side boob action. That's too sad, really.
I know. I wonder what they did with their life at that moment in time. I bet they did some contemplation and sat there with the.
I was going to say, I tell you what they did not do, and that was evaluate themselves. Obviously, because the minute that shit came back up, they're like, oh, duck lips and side boob. Side titty.
Yeah, they were like, all right, it's been 8 hours. I have missed giving you guys 10 photos of myself. Here they are. Bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, I don't fucking get it. But we've talked about that, and we're going to be doing a deep dive into the financials of the social media platforms. And we're going to talk about how big these guys are. And again, remember that these antitrust suits keep getting thrown out. So they're not stopping them. Anyway. So educate me on some more stuff.
You're so funny. Well, yeah, on the antitrust stuff, I would love to come back on that, because I'm actually building out an entire timeline. It's going to probably take me a month, but I'm building out an entire timeline right now from the 1980s That was the first cybersecurity law to where we are today. And it's related to cybersecurity infrastructure, the different sectors, the financial, the healthcare sector is a huge one because that's the backbone of America, big pharma. And so there's this, I'm putting together the entire frame for outline and timeline of executive orders, executive memorandum or presidential memorandums, the FISMA, different laws, policy. And it's really interesting because we're completely siloed in all of our agencies and organizations federally, which is super scary. But yet they're the ones that are running the country because we're allowing them to from the cybersecurity space. Because we're like, well, we don't want to protect our own shit. So we're going to let the government do it. And now that's not going to look pretty in the next 5 years. But going back to connected devices. So let's go back a few steps on connected thing that you're talking about. Everything is connected. Well, there's a big push right now in the technology space and emerging technology with AI, as you mentioned, 3D printing, quantum computing. But one of the big things that is happening right now, and people are not aware of it, is IoT devices, Internet of Thing devices. And what are these? These are going back to your like smart thermostats and your smart pucks that you have in your house, and being able to basically operate your house from your vehicle using Bluetooth or using your internet and wireless devices. And yet these are really nice. My entire house, I do not have a smart house because I know the vulnerabilities. And right now, I have numbers over here. By 2025, they're projected that there's going to be 30.9 billion IoT devices in the market out, which I think it's actually probably even higher than that. I want to say trillions. That just doesn't seem like it's high enough. Why that keeps me up at night, Mel, is knowing the fact that one of these IoT devices, if not properly patched or updated, or the firmware isn't updated appropriately, and let's say it's in the healthcare system, then an adversary is going to be able to breach that network, get into that system, move laterally, and then start taking our information, our medical documents, everything that's electronic, all of that, and then turning around and using it against us. And a lot of people, that's one of the number one things that criminal actors will use is your medical documentation, because a lot of that is private information protected by HIPAA, and they leverage that to do what? Get money and create, conduct financial crime. And it's a really scary thing because more of these devices are being pushed out by the vendors, connecting us, making these what we're calling smart cities now. But one of these devices could not only breach the network that it's on, but they can span out. And because you go into the internet and can expand out and start breaching other things, and could eventually, if not careful, take down an entire city. Like we could literally see screw like bombs or pressure cookers. Think about a threat actor. It can get into one of these IoT devices that's in your house somehow. It's connected into another network. Maybe you're logging into your work network that is in a big high rise in downtown. Now you're connected to their systems. I mean, it's really wild, but that's what we're going to start seeing. And people need to be prepared for it because these organizations don't want to put the money forward to protect themselves until the risk is high enough. So they're keeping like financial institutions that probably have a higher risk. Insider threat, for example, is about 75% of their perceived risk, meaning they project they may have a breach, 75% likelihood from an insider malicious actor, because people want money. And so financial institutions are one of the number one targeted areas that we see from threat actors in this area. And it's crazy. It's going to be wild. Things are about to get amped up. Next 5 years, it's going to get wild.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't have any of those devices in my home just because I don't see they're not that necessary for me personally. If I want to turn off the light, I fucking turn off the light. It's not that hard. I mean, if I can't get off my couch and walk 5 steps to turn off my light, well, then maybe I need to fucking, go for a walk and get some type of movement. And the thing is, when you're talking about upgrading, that's exactly what we talked about in the US power grid episode, which is the reason why, we have power lines that are over 50 years old, because they're not updating them until there is a problem. And that's when we see the forest fires and we see the sagging power lines, which we covered. But in that episode, as you were talking, Jax, one of the things that I covered is that they were trying to use artificial intelligence and they were trying to get them all synced up and upgrade them to a grid so that they can use AI to find vulnerabilities before they turn into problems. And there was a concern of, there's the crumbling infrastructure of just the physical actual wires, and then there's actually the trying to upgrade the power grill with these different types of technologies that can find these errors. But then it sounds like we're kind of in that weird catch 22 where they're not really doing anything to fix the power grid, which we did cover. But then the steps that they are trying to take to maybe try to make it a little smarter actually is going to potentially open it up to more cyber attacks that could actually do more damage than, say, them just maybe dropping a bomb on a power generator or something like that. Am I understanding you correctly?
It will have a different effect. Let's say it that way. It's a different effect from, say, if you drop a bomb, you're going to have that physical damage to the infrastructure. But if you do a cyber attack, you won't see that external damage like you will with a bomb. You're going to have a different impact, which we've seen through ransomware, and we've seen through data exfil, and having your data being pulled and then sold on the dark market, the deep dark market. It is, the damage is, I feel like it's deeper than you're going to see, unless it's a nuclear bomb, than you're going to see from a pressure cooker bomb. That blast area is going to be 400 meters, where with a cyber attack, the borders are borderless, and they can.
I was going to say it would keep moving, right?
Yeah, it's borderless. Yeah, it'll expand out. I mean, these attacks are becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And now the federal government is starting to move into mandating that these organizations announce if they've had an incident or a breach, not just an incident, because those are two different things, but if they've had an actual breach inside of their infrastructure, they have to report it within, I think they're trying to do it in 3 days. The thing keeps moving, 3 days, 24 hours, but they're trying to pass a law around this. And one of the things is, if they do not report they've had a breach, they will receive a fine, which I don't know if that's going to pass, but that is literally what is happening right now at our congressional executive level, is this law, or the reframement of our current laws and policies to start forcing organizations to report. But the thing is, what's really crappy about this is it's focused only on federal organizations. So DoD contractors, subcontractors, and primes. So when I see that, when I read that, I'm like, well, shit, now we're just going to have a mass exodus of DoD organizations moving to the private sector, and the problem still isn't fixed. We're going to still be having breaches. So one of the things the government's doing right now, and I'm going to try to keep this high level, is they're moving into vetting our third-party vendors because of like SolarWinds, for example. That was a third-party breach that happened, and it impacted
I'm not familiar with SolarWinds. Can you educate me on that?
Yeah, so I should have read up on SolarWinds. So I'm going to tell everybody it's listening. I haven't read up on this in a little while, but there was a breach that happened at the first part of 2020. It was a third-party vulnerability that happened. It impacted a large, I can't remember the number, you could Google it, but a large number of organizations, government, private sector. It has been, even to date, one of the largest breaches that has happened. And why that was a moment of awakening for our federal government is because it was a third-party vendor that was supposedly a trusted source. And what took place is your system received a patch, an update. Let's say, using Mac, for example, I had an iOS update that we just had on 15. You receive it, you update it, you don't think anything of it. And that's what all of these organizations did. They got pushed an update, they updated their systems, and the update had a vulnerability in it. Now, they still haven't figured out how this has happened. It's still under investigation. But what they think possibly could have happened is you've got SolarWinds, the organization that pushed out the update, but they also have a third party associated with them that assisted them with building this and coding this update. So there's an investigation of this organization as well as SolarWinds of how this happened. That's why it's so interconnected, and it's so hard to find attribution on things like this, because it's layers. So what transpired, and what really is really concerning, is when this update went into the system, I believe that the adversaries were in the system for, 6 or 8 months, something outrageous amount of time before they were even noticed. And during that time, there was a beaconing out of these machines and information, and they were just sitting and waiting. And some of the organizations were impacted. Some of the organizations that did the update, they don't believe they were impacted. They didn't see any data being exfilled, but globally it was a massive impact. So the government has been building this infrastructure called the Cyber Maturity Model certification. And they're right now currently rolling it out. My company is really, like, we're hugely involved in it. It's called the CMMC. So there's this huge shift you're going to see in the federal space in the next 5 years. So by 2025, all organizations that work in the federal space or provide services, so third-party vendors that provide services into the space, have to be CMMC compliant. What really sucks about that, and it's good, is organizations are going to have to pay between probably $50 to maybe $250,000 just to become compliant. And think about that, Mel. How many small to mid-sized organizations that are 20 people or less are going to be able to afford that type of money to still work in the federal space? Right. So you've got that happening. Now you've got all these federal laws and regulations putting pressure and financial repercussions on these organizations. I have a feeling that what's going to happen is there's going to be another monopoly. It's going to be Deloitte. It's going to be Booz Allen, because they're the organizations that are going to be able to afford it. And they're going to start sucking up all of these smaller organizations that can't afford it and be like, you come over here, we'll make you a joint venture, or we'll make you one of our subcontractors, and we'll pay for your certifications, for example. And we're going to see this really unique shift, but I don't think it's going to be a good thing that's going to start happening in the cybersecurity space. But it goes back to what I was saying. If we don't start policing our own and start taking care of our own infrastructures, our critical infrastructures and our organizations, the federal government's going to do it for us. And it's not going to be pretty. And we're just going to start giving them our power.
Right. And that's what happened in the US Power Grid episode, is that they granted the utility companies natural monopolies.
Yep.
And the reason for and that's what they call it, a natural monopoly, is where they go, yeah, we know it's a monopoly, but really it's very expensive to get in this space and to upkeep the infrastructure. So we don't really have a choice. So they're going to be the natural monopoly.
Yeah. And on the solar wind, so I did a quick research over here, Mel, and just to give some statistics around it. So this breach actually was known to have already initiated in 2019, the end of 2019. And in December of 2020 is when the SolarWinds attack was actually announced. It was announced by a large cybersecurity firm called FireEye. And I looked up the numbers. It was over 18,000 government entities in Fortune 500 companies, and at least 9 federal agencies, and more than 100 companies were exposed to the breach. It was wild, but it was because of this specific incident that the government, the United States, had to take a knee and really start evaluating the third-party infrastructure and how they were properly vetting these individuals and allowing them into our organizations to provide services.
That's so crazy to me, that like how you described it, that they were in there kind of mucking around for a couple months. That's like somebody walking around your fucking house for months and months and months, digging through your personal files, yep, digging through that drawer that you keep hidden that you don't know anybody to know about. Just things like that, just for months and months at a time, just cruising through your fucking house. And so when you say when you say that they had exposure to these entities, you're talking about like personal data, or are you talking about like what specifically would something that they would have access to? Like, so for instance, if I hear that, oh, there was a breach and somebody got my address, well, that's a little disturbing, but okay, it's my fucking address, right? So what are we talking about personal information? Because one of the things that you had said before we started, which I always knew, which is why I kind of don't freak out about it. But with you saying it, I'm like, oh, fuck, it's true, is that everybody in the United States just needs to assume that their data has been stolen.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about right before we hit record on this. Is if you haven't done so, I would go to the PAWN.me, PAWN, PAWN.me website, and it'll show you if your email address has been compromised. And I have an alert on my iPhone, so I know if one of my email addresses has been compromised, and I know when to go in to check and change all my passwords. And so I know there's been certain emails that have been compromised for myself. So
wait a minute, I'm sorry. What's the website again? Because I've never heard of it.
It is, have I been PWNED, pawn.com. That's the website. Have I been PWNED.com. haveibeenpawned.com. You can throw in an email or a phone number, and then it'll generate and let you know if you've been pawned and if it's been breached. And then it'll tell you, I think maybe even when it was done. I know one of my emails were, so I can always look it up and it'll tell me.
Yeah. And for listeners, besides all of the ways that you can get in contact with Jax in the show notes, I'm also going to have this website in there because I've never heard of this website. I did not know this existed. And I think that, for the listeners of the show, this is something that's going to, probably not a bad website to go check out if you have the balls to see how much you've been exposed.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my accounts. Yeah, one of my email addresses, I know it's been pawned several times. It's been in 7 data breaches. One was like this clothing line, Poshmark. They were breached. Like you could Google, I think it was 2019. And that's how that email address got in that breach. And there's been other data breaches that this particular email's been attached to. So what I always tell people is, if you have the time and you really care, I do throwaway emails. So I create a Google email. It's completely throwaway. I attribute it to a Google number and I use it for all these random accounts that you have to create in websites to do anything. They make you create an account. So I use that. And then after about a year or so, I trash it and get a new one. And I just do stuff like that. And I don't tie any of my personal data to that email address. And then that keeps some attribution away from me. And then I have my business email, but I typically don't try to use my business email for anything outside of like signing up for conferences or, legit business accounts. I don't use my personal email address for anything like selling stuff online or anything like that. Yeah. That's the best way to protect yourself and like reduce your attribution on your online presence.
So going back to the assumption that all of your data has been vulnerabilized. I just made up that word because it sounds cool. So when you say that, your data has been vulnerabilized, are you talking about like, feel free to use that, listeners. And Jax, let me let you have that one for free too. Are you talking about like social security numbers and stuff like that? Or are you talking about just overall general emails and phone numbers and shit?
Well, when you've been vulnerabilized, I feel like that's like, a way of like vulnerable, like a sexual approach to your data, your intellectual property. Yeah. It's woof.
So mark my words, when you're giving your next speech,
oh, God.
You're going to use my term, and I totally want to be credited. My friend Mel O at Finance is the Other F Word has made up the term vulnerabilized. You're welcome. I'm telling you, people get it because you did it, right? You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, write that down. Make sure you spell it right. I don't know how to spell it. So however you spell it, I guess is going to be the right way.
Sounds like cannibalized, vulnerabilized. Anyway.
But you are being cannibalized, right?
Yeah, kind of. You are.
What?
So
I am on fire this morning.
You're being vulnerabilized through your inability to secure your network. So the adversary is going in and snooping through that secret drawer that you thought nobody knew about, but they will find it. So taking a step back on that question, the general dwell time of adversaries on a network is about 6 months. That's the general dwell time. So they're in your network for 6 months snooping around. And what they're doing during that time is they're really trying to like get a, let's just say, lay of the land, trying to identify where is that secret drawer, where is your sensitive data. The typical thing that they want to attack and get data. Data is like the oil in the cybersecurity industry. So they want to go after your data because if they can still, for example, we're on a financial show. So let's talk about banking. I worked at a bank for a year, and the primary things that they're going to take is they're going to take credit card information. They're going to take your social security number as one of the customers or clients at that bank. Why? Because they can either sell it on the dark web, or they can pull that data and then they encrypt it and then they get money in return for it, either by the organization itself. But cyber criminals have even gotten smarter now, and they're going to the individuals like you because they're thinking, well, now the organizations are getting a lot smarter. Maybe they don't pay the ransom because they realize, well, okay, it's this information, but the individual can go change their credit card information and they can do a social security alert on their social security card, whatever, and we'll pay them or do whatever and we'll move on. The risk and reward here. So they'll move on, but that doesn't mean the adversary is not going to come to you. The other thing they're going to try to take is intellectual property. They're going to try to steal information. They're going to try to layer their approach, still client information, still intellectual property, and then and this is why I never take personal photos of myself that could be like provocative or used against me, because if you have those on your phone or on your computer, they're going to steal that. They're going to leverage it against, say, an executive. What if they got, provocative photos of the CEO of Capital One, and they were able to share that with them and said, hey, if you don't give us this X amount of money, this is going to be smeared out. And it could be done so in a way that could destroy his career and his life and his marriage and everything. So there's other things that they go after, but those are typically the primary three things: is data exfil, and intellectual property, and then any way to incriminate an individual and try to get you to buy in to it. Yeah, it's sick. And two, what people have to realize is this is a business for these guys. It's a very professional, and I say professional loosely, but some of these cyber criminals, when you have a ransom, for example, and you need to pay it, you call, I laugh because you literally call an 800 number and they're very nice. They're like, oh, hey, how would you like to pay that $5 million? Would you like to do that in quarterly payments? Or yeah, they work with you.
What?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. Unlike, so what you're telling me is that they're more lenient on their bill payment than debt collectors is what I'm hearing.
They don't charge you. Like, they're like, hey, you can even negotiate with them. You can like credit card companies, you're like, hey, I don't have 5 million. We take 3 million. They're like, yeah, okay, we'll give you 3 million. Here's your key. You can go unlock your things. Yeah. So there's actually companies now that you can hire that are negotiators for these like companies, for these ransomware companies. And so you hire these people on, you pay them like, $50,000 to negotiate to get your 5 million down to 3 million. And then, so they work with, it's people don't realize it, but they are extremely professional. And they even have like chat groups. You can talk to them on like chat systems and stuff like that, where you can talk to them about everything that's, your distress that you're in right now. It's so bad. Yeah. Yeah, they probably give the guys like it's an actual business model. Like they get paid 9 to 5. This is their 9 to 5 job. And then it's a call center.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there, but one of the things I wanted to touch on, and I wanted to give you guys, because I'm trying to bring this into real world financial stuff. When we talk about credit companies, we covered on the Understanding Your Credit episode, we talked about that TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax are all privately held. They're all private companies. They have their own formula of how they dictate what your FICO score is, which is the reason why you can never seem to fucking get your FICO score unless like you're buying a house or something like that. And they want to play hide and seek with that bullshit because their formula is proprietary. That's why you can have the same exact information on all three bureaus and all of your FICO scores are different. But one of the things that credit card companies have started doing, like when Jax had just alluded to the fact that they're not paying the, sometimes they might not pay the ransom. You guys have to be careful with the financial fraud that's out there, specifically for your older, vulnerable relatives, because I had a situation with a client where she got taken for about $10,000 to $12,000 in cash advances. This is a very good client. She is older. She's on a fixed income, as most retirees are. And I said, okay, cool, no problem. We're going to call the credit card company. We're going to explain to them that it was fraud and they're going to get it all reversed. Well, what happened is that she had a notice come through saying for Apple software for fraud on her computer, and it was going to cost $10,000. And it come to find out later that the software was free. And she just was ignorant to the fact that she didn't understand this. And so she didn't have the $10,000. So they took control over her. They took control over her computer and then said, oh, you need to buy this software and we'll fix it. Well, what she had done is I thought she had just pulled, a cash a bit, like they had given them the credit card number and they just pulled the money off the credit card. But these people are getting smarter now because they know that that's easily disputable. And then it gets, get caught up in merchant services and things like that. But what they had her do was go to her bank and pull the cash advance in cash and then go to another fucking bank and deposit the cash in their fucking account. That was these are major banks, you guys. This is not some bullshit, tiny fucking bank. As a matter of fact, it's a bank we've talked about on this show. And so she goes to the bank and pulls it in person, drives over across town to deposit money into these fuckers' accounts as cash. And we're on the phone with credit card companies, and credit card companies, even though they know it's fraud, even though they can tell that the client was very confused and did not know what she was doing, they said, well, you took the cash in person. Therefore, we don't know what you did with the cash. So fuck you and have a nice day. And the impact of that is the fact that the credit card companies who have more than enough fucking money to look at their client and go, fuck, we're really sorry that happened. Let us fix this issue for you. They said, well, fuck you. And so let me tell you what the ramifications of that. I talked about on last episode that these are pebbles in the pond and these waves go out. And by the time you hit the wave, you don't realize it's something that happened 4 years ago. Well, in her case, because they were cash advances, they were anywhere between 22 to 27% interest. She had to pull money out of her IRA, which was limited, to pay this off because she could not afford the credit card payments. And I tried to send her to a bankruptcy attorney. And because I told her, fuck that, you're old enough, who gives a shit? They can eat your dick and they can deal with it themselves. Well, what ended up happening is that because of the bankruptcy laws, the way she is not allowed to claim and file bankruptcy. So while all of this is going on, besides cybersecurity, there's all of this other stuff that's happening where they're getting around the credit card companies' policies. And in the end, the credit card companies don't give a fuck about you. So I'm sorry, Jax, I didn't mean to get on that tangent, but I needed to pull that in because this is stuff that's happening to your older relatives and you guys need to really be vigilant about it.
That is absolutely wild. You're just saying that. And I'm like, Mel, you were telling me that story and I'm like, oh my God, I just don't understand that. Like, who would pay $10,000 for an update on your machine and not think this is weird that you're having to do all these exchanges and go to this bank and deposit here, and you're not talking to a single friend about this for them to talk you out of it, talk you off the cliff? Like, I'm just,
or your CFP or your fucking CFP.
That's a lot of money.
I know,
buy a new
especially
system.
for retirees.
Buy like five freaking Mac laptops. I mean, they're expensive. You could buy 5 Mac laptops. Give me one, and I'll update your other 4.
And I'm like, I'm your fucking advisor and your CFP. Why would you not pick up the phone and go, I don't know, this sounds a little weird. So anyway, just be vigilant on that. So what else scary shit is happening every day that the normal person is not going to know about? Because I don't feel like I'm completely terrified yet. So, go ahead and scare me a little bit more with some crazy shit that's happening.
Oh my God. So things that keep me up at night, that's what I always think about. What keeps me up at night? Knowing that our SCADA systems are as vulnerable as they are, and we have 16 critical infrastructures, nuclear power, healthcare, like all of these infrastructures that are not protected in the way they need to be. And knowing that emerging technology, like the IoT, the AI, machine learning, quantum computing, it's going at a very rapid speed and growth right now. Like we're looking at fusion power, which is nuclear power using fusion instead of fission. Fission is the current way that we use nuclear power, which is terrible. And fusion is a cleaner way of creating this power. And the United States is looking to have a fusion center by 2035 that will completely change the way that we operate as a civilization around the world. It'll push technology further and faster. But with that, I mean, think about it. We're going to have self-driving cars now in the next 5 years. What if a vulnerability in an unpatched car or an IoT device inside of a car? Because people need to realize you've got a car, but usually with one IoT device or one vehicle, you've got a myriad of vectors, and vectors are different avenues to attack a system, different ways of like getting into the system. And a lot of system will have multiple different vectors because they have multiple different ways and codings. And it's like having a house and having multiple doors. Think about it like that. You got a back door, a front door, and a side door. It's the same with systems. We've got these vehicles. So you've got everything patched. You got one thing that's off. This happened at Black Hat a few years ago, cybersecurity conference. It was like 2016 or 17, they'll bring vehicles, big car dealerships will bring vehicles in and they'll bring them to Hackers Village is what they call it. And they want to see if somebody can hack a vehicle because they want to test their vulnerabilities. And they didn't think about it, but somebody was able to get in through the Bluetooth on the tire pressure of the vehicle. Once they breached that system, because it was vulnerable, they had access to all of the entire computer system of that vehicle. So what keeps me awake and what scares me, because I'm going to buy an electric vehicle. That's my goal for Christmas of next year, because I hate driving, and it's better for the economy, or for the pollution in the world. What if somebody takes over that system? Now they have access not only to that car, but likely to other systems, because now we're running in a smart city and a device. And what if they just start causing collisions? And you're like, you have no control of your vehicle at that time, at that point. That's where we're going. And it's really frightening to think about stuff like that. And like your vehicle, you will have as much control as the company allows you to have, meaning you might be able to try to run those updates. But if that organization, like say Apple or Microsoft or whoever, isn't publishing and patching these 0-day vulnerabilities like we saw in Apple recently, Apple had a lot of 0-day vulnerabilities that just came out. Everybody should have updated their Mac and iOS devices if you haven't. Then you're vulnerable because they haven't ran the update to push it down for you to be able to update your system. So you're still left at their disposal. And so it scares me. It really does. And I'm in this space, so I try to stay abreast of everything. But there are days, Mel, that I literally just have to do the push away from the desk and like clear my mind, because it can become really dark sometimes to know where we're going as a nation and where our adversaries are going and how behind we are in the cyber race and the cyber warfare compared to say like China or Russia. And it's a scary space, because I believe, being a cyber warrant officer and working in the cyber and electronic warfare space, I see this and I see where we're going, or let's say where we're not going. And I'm afraid that it's going to take like a catastrophic thing to happen. And when I say catastrophic, like lives will be taken by a cyber attack. And that could be like one of our critical infrastructures were attacked in New York. It was a dam. It was in 19 or 2020. It was recent. It was within the last 5 years. And the adversary was able to get into the SCADA system, and they were going to open up the dam and flood the city area, and it was going to kill hundreds of people. But for some reason, like there was an employee out that day, or the gate was closed, or something was closed down physically that they weren't able to open up. And because of that attack didn't take place. That would have been 100+ people could have possibly died or more from that attack. And I believe, unfortunately, something like that is going to happen, if not in the United States, in another country somewhere. And then we're going to have this awakening of, oh shit moment. Because it's hard for people to grasp and understand, because it is a virtual space. Like you don't see it, so you don't realize that you could be vulnerable right now. Heck, you could have something on your system right now and you don't even know it. Not that you do, but there's a likelihood of that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm digesting. I'm digesting it, and I think I'm going to keep that pause in, because that, I'm sure a lot of people pause too, like, fuck, the fact that our dams, because what I was thinking of was like, okay, if our dams are on systems that can be hacked, then like for somebody who's, non-military background, even though I have family in military, what I automatically started thinking of is like, well, so can they come in and control our nukes? Like, can they come in and hack that system? And then all of a sudden, our defense mechanisms are used against us, and then they don't even have to fucking come over here, right? Mm-hmm. Am I on left center on that, or is that, because that's where my brain went when you were talking about the dam? I was like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's exactly it. They can do all these attacks remote. I'm looking right here on Google, and I might have had so everybody that's listening, I have a TBI, and numbers and me don't get along very well, and I sometimes mix numbers up, but I think the attack that I was thinking of was in 2016 or roundabout. And it was Iranian cyber attack on a New York dam. And it wasn't successful, like I said, but yeah, a lot of people don't even know about this. But yeah, it was an Iran cyber group that had tried to attack a New York dam. It was wild. It's so, yeah, it's and they were in Iran. And what's crazy about these attacks too is we have VPNs, and
we have different ways of routing our traffic outside of VPNs. There's a myriad of other different ways that you can route traffic and protect and encrypt your traffic. And so we'll attribution, again, is really hard in this space. And what they'll do is we somehow identified it was coming out of Iran, but likely they were probably making the attack, routing their traffic. And sometimes what we'll see is they'll route it through the UK and then out. And it takes a long time for us to even start identifying where these attacks even coming from. Like a large majority come from North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia. And they're kind of speckled in after that. But those are our primary threat groups that target us on a regular basis. And it's scary because you know that the adversaries have a lot less governance around this. Unlike America, we have a couple of agencies that work very heavily in this space. And so there's a lot more work that's taking place in there that even I don't know about, and that's fine. I have zero desire to be in that space. But I know from my experience that our adversaries still have a lot more leeway than even those agencies have, because they give no F's. Like Russia, China, they've got literal sweat camps with little kids that are learning cybersecurity at an extremely young age and learning how to hack and take down America. And like there's literally a China 100-year plan. And I think they're coming up on like the 50-year mark or less of this 100-year plan. And the 100-year plan is to be the #1 global power in the world. And one of their goals is to take out America. And they're working behind the scenes with Russia right now. This is all Googleable. If you just go into Google, and I created that word, Googleable. Go on Google.
Use it.
Yeah, you have to use that with vulnerable eyes and Googleable. So go into Google and research this, and you'll know that there's a relationship behind the scenes. And I say behind the scenes because it's not publicized, but Russia and China are working together. And there's that communication. And even North Korea, good old Kim's popping in there. And so there's that going on. And my personal assessment of this is what we used to see cyber actors that were really silent. So you'd see North Korea, Iran, and China and Russia, and they all have their nexuses. But now you're starting to see more of a mix and more of these techniques and procedures of attacking starting to blend. And what I believe is going to happen, and I believe it already is happening, there are nation states and threat groups that are working together and they're blending their TTPs. And I believe that right now we're at a place where these threat groups are just posturing to eventually do an attack on our infrastructure in some way. I can be totally wrong, but I've talked with other researchers, and I just posed this idea to somebody a week and a half ago in the haunted hacker community, and he agrees with this assessment. It's a warfare, and it's the Wild West warfare. And to win the game right now, you've got to put all your decks, like all your cards on the table and start working together. And a lot of people want to take out America. It's kind of scary.
No, that is terrifying. And as you know, as we're talking about how most of the United States budget is based on non-discretionary spending. So when we're looking at the budget items and we're, because some of you guys might be listening to this like I am, like, why the fuck aren't we spending more on fixing our cybersecurity? But then I remember that only a third of the United States budget is discretionary spending. The other 2/3 of it is non-discretionary spending that goes to entitlement programs like Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid and those types of things. And so when we're talking about the lack of funding, it's easy for everybody to sit around and have a beer and want to fix all the world's problems and say, well, why aren't we spending money here? Why aren't we spending money there? Well, because that's not the way that the United States budget is structured. And so so in my head, I'm thinking, well, how the fuck do you start to even fix that? I mean, is it that we start taking little kids and we start training them to, obviously not to be malicious in it, but to learn cybersecurity really, really early for our side, which is of course an overhaul of the potential education system. But what is the answer? Because that sounds fucking terrifying.
Well, we are starting to train our children, which is great, and not in an adverse way, but we're starting to be able to, in these VOTEC. So I went to cosmetology school when I went to high school out of VOTEC. I didn't want to go to cosmetology school, but it was either that or mechanics. And so I did cosmetology. Back then, we didn't have cyber programs or IT or coding. Now we do. And there's this huge STEM push. We're behind the curve, but thankfully we're making it finally happen. but there are a ton of STEM initiatives that are coming out to start teaching the kids at a young age how to code, how to do certain things in the cybersecurity space, and how to like engineering classes, things like that, to start getting them abreast of knowing this space. And also, one thing I'm really a big advocate on is starting to teach our kids. Like, I posed this to my professor the other day. What do we do? Everybody knows this. What do you do if you get caught on fire? What is the three things that you do?
Oh, you drop, roll. There's three things. Wow.
Yeah.
I would assume the first thing would be look for water. But no, I think it's, I don't know, tuck, drop and roll. I know you drop and roll. Stop, drop and roll.
Yep.
Woo! Yeah, look at that fifth grade shit coming back there. Stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
And which would make you believe that you would be catching on fire a lot more than has actually happened. The way that they pushed that, I was like, wow, this is going to be a common occurrence. Like, I'm just going to fucking randomly catch on fire, spontaneously combust. Stop, drop, and roll. There you go.
Right. So how many times have you caught on fire in your life?
Thankfully, not ever yet.
Right. Most of our viewers and listeners have probably not caught on fire, but I can tell you, if not every single one of them can say and figure it out finally, stop, drop, and roll. And we teach it, like you said, like there's going to be a high likelihood that you're gonna suddenly combust into fire and flames.
Right.
And so I was thinking about this literally a couple of days ago. I'm like getting ready for work, and then I'm like, why are we not teaching our children stop, think, and click, or don't click on phishing, on cybersecurity, because the likelihood of that happening to you is 100%. But we are more concerned about you getting caught on fire and teaching a legacy mindset. Yeah, it's cool. That's a good thing to teach. I'm not saying let's not teach them to not know what to do if they.
But maybe just do it once. Maybe just cover it once and not every fucking year of elementary school. And it's the same thing with financial literacy. I mean, people have checkbooks and they have credit and they don't know how to do anything with it. It's fucking ludicrous. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and there's concern with the I don't even know what it would be considered the very, very, very late Zoomers, which is the little kids that have actually lived through the pandemic, that have done a homeschool of a year and a half. I was talking to a elementary school teacher yesterday, and she said it's just a fucking shit show. The kids don't know shit. And, there's a variety of things in the educational space. We're not going to get into that, but there's a concern about when these kids start moving up and they become our doctors and our lawyers, what is that education really going to look on? And I think probably the reason why they don't teach that in school is because a lot of that comes down to social media. Like, stop putting all your fucking business out there. They need
to have it like sex ed. Like, what are the things? Maybe you shouldn't be taking your booby shots and putting them on Snapchat. Like, things like that, like having literacy around social media and internet and what it means when you put your information out, that it's never going away and it will always be there forever. It's like a tattoo. When I tell kids, I'm like, you can remove that tattoo. You're going to still see the line of that tattoo. That is the same with your like social media presence. Yeah, it's got to be systemic change. We're moving in the direction, but with everything in the government and how we work in the United States, it's like pond water, and we're moving like so slow. We're just like cruising down, while I feel like our adversaries are just like, they're just like over there, like, jamming it out, having a good old time. So we'll see what happens. I think there's going to be a rude awakening. We're going to, like, the box is going to get shaken up, and then we're going to have to start figuring it out. Hopefully not grabbing our ankles figuring it out, but
right, exactly. I say, well, I'm looking forward to that. That sounds fucking exciting. So you have, as we get out of here, I want you to plug all your stuff. Tell us where we can buy the book. Tell us where they can follow you. You have a YouTube channel, cover that. Also, Jax has podcasts. So please touch on all of that as well. So how can all of our listeners go, man, she's amazing. How the fuck do I find more information on this girl? Tell them all the ways they can get access to you. Without breaching your security.
Yeah. So I have a lot of social media presence out there now. It's I would say LinkedIn, JAX, just S, Sierra, or my personal page is I am JAX, jax.me, or my business page, Outpost Gray, GRAY. So outpostgray.com. Outpost Gray is also my blog site on Medium. It's also my YouTube channel. And then my podcast, it's a little harder to find because of the name, but it's called, you can find all the information on all the sites though, but it's Hackers and Hexen. And Hackers with a Z, and Hexen, I'm not even going to try to spell it for you. Just go to my other sites, you'll find me. And yeah, it would be great to connect. Anybody has questions for me, ping me. I just live in the cybersecurity space. Literally, I go to grad school full time. So I live and breathe it. Yeah, grad school full time, Mel, and running a company and all the things. I figured out. It's cool.
Yeah.
This has been fun though. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured out. Well, I'm glad we finally got you on the show. And of course, you guys can follow us on social media at Finance is the Other F Word. Where can they get your book, Jax?
Oh, yeah. Amazon, of course. Yeah.
So pick up the book, follow Jax, make sure that you're checking her out. She really knows her shit. If you guys couldn't tell from the time that we've spent together, I really appreciate you coming on the show. We'll probably have you on the show again for sure. Just, when I'm starting to feel comfortable and placid, then I'll make sure you come back on here so you can make me feel terrified of like even swiping my credit card again. And with that, you guys, I think we are out this bitch.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please check back for upcoming episodes and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Finances, the Other F Word.